Hello, this is a recording of my free webinar taught just recently on January 17th, 2019. I hope you enjoy it. All right. Well, hey, everybody. Thanks for being here. This is a new thing for me. I'm trying this free webinar today. What do you think? Is that light above my head? Should I turn that off? The camera angle is the lighting. It's always a thing. We'll go with that for now. I do have obviously there's a chat window here in GoToMeeting, so you can chat to me. This will be visible for everybody. By the way, I am recording this, and I will probably upload this to YouTube at some point. So if you don't want your chart, to be looked at, if it has to be anonymous or something, we'll kind of figure that part out. I'll keep the chat window off on my second screen for now, just in case. So, Karina, good morning. Thank you. Yeah, this is neat. I was going to start my class today. I was going to start my locational astrology class today, and it was going to be, for me, it's a big deal. Actually, today is a big deal for me for a couple of reasons. So, I am a Leo. We're just going to go ahead and start with me. That's how we like to roll over here. Not exactly all the time with me, but anyway. So anyway, big stuff for me. So in my secondary progressions, literally yesterday, like in the evening, Saturn went into Leo in my secondary progressions. This is a Western astrology technique called secondary progressions, where you look at every year that you've lived and you move the planets forward one day, right, in their actual motion from, your birthday, okay? So anyway, I'm 43 and a half years old, and 43 and a half days after I was born, the planet Saturn went into the sign Leo. This is also I have the Sun and Mercury in Leo and the midheaven in Leo with Scorpio rising. So Leo for me is a very important sign, and so this should be, according to astrology, a very important kind of turning point in my life. So I chose to do some free astrology webinars today on astrocartography because that's kind of my new mission, really. I'm trying to say certain things about relocation astrology based on the work that I've done. And I should introduce myself a little bit here as well. So I have been doing astrology 25 years. Again, I'm 43. So when I was, just in college, I started doing readings my freshman year in college toward the end of that year, and essentially have never looked back. So I practice Western and Vedic astrology. That's one thing that if you hang out with me, if you do my classes or any of my things, you're going to see I just go back and forth. I know how they both work for me. And so I just use them. It's really simple. If I didn't think it was useful, I wouldn't use both of them, But it is. It's really, really beneficial in my experience. Now, that's not for everybody. And I know that some of you are studying astrology and you're saying, wait a minute, I only believe in the sidereal zodiac. Or wait a minute, I'm only into tropical Western astrology. I mean, that's cool. I'm not saying... I will disagree a little bit when it comes to locational astrology. I will only say... I might disagree with you. I might say that, I think if you're not looking at the tropical and the sidereal, you're missing out on some really, really important basic information. Some of this stuff is really not that hard to pick up on, folks. It's really not, right? I gave an example in a webinar, actually a YouTube interview recently. One of the Facebook groups in astrology, on locational astrology, right? And this gentleman lived in a place where his Jupiter in Aquarius was on the midheaven. And it was in Capricorn in his Vedic chart. And things like this are very obvious when you use tropical and sidereal and you understand things like the fact that a planet in its fall is not in an easy place, right? So Jupiter in Capricorn is not bad, but it's certainly challenging for certain things. Let's see if I can fix my lighting here. So it's certainly challenging for certain things. And my Logitech camera doesn't want to move too much right now. So I look at tropical and sidereal because sometimes you see really obvious things like that. Like, oh, your Venus that you think is just in Libra is actually in Virgo too. And if we look at your Vedic chart, we're going to see why Venus is a problem for you because it's in Virgo over there. So there are so many concepts we get into with locational astrology. And one of the most basic, most fundamental, which I did talk about recently in a YouTube video, is you have to look at things like when planets are in their fall. Okay, so if a planet, we'll just go through them real quick. The Sun in Libra, Moon in Scorpio, Mercury in Pisces, Venus in Virgo, Mars in Cancer, Jupiter in Capricorn, Saturn in Aries. Any of those placements, you have to be very careful about because that is the most difficult thing for a planet, according to its sign placement, is to be in its fall. Now, if it is retrograde, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, if they are retrograde and in their most challenging sign, the sign of fall, that actually creates a very different situation. It's challenging and it's amazing at the same time. It becomes this really mixed bag kind of thing. And you'll see, for example, these amazing, spiritual teachers or leaders or people with Jupiter and Capricorn, but retrograde. So we're getting, you see how I am. I get right into the thick of it because this is what I love to do. I love to talk about how this stuff really works. So yeah, I've lived in this home for about 16 years. We're actually working on selling it pretty soon. So I'm about to leave probably my home for the last 16 plus years. And I have been sitting in this chair at this desk doing astrology essentially that whole time. Now I did over these 16 years write a couple novels. I even went to massage school for 6 months. I even taught part-time a little bit of fourth grade and then some middle school math because I got opportunities to do these things and I loved it. But throughout all that time, the one thing that was constant, the one thing that's been constant for me for 25 years or so, in addition to dogs barking, is that I've been doing astrology. So, and locational astrology has been my real focus since somewhere in the early 2000s. I've been really, really focused on that. We have Billy and Oliver, the Scorpios. They love wrestling with each other, and neither one of them can ever win. You know what I mean? Billy's like got to be 4 or 5 times as heavy as Oliver. But they're both Scorpios. Oliver's younger, so he's got the energy, and they just go at it, and it's a lot of fun. So if they keep barking, I'll have to move them out or something. But thank you guys for chilling out. I appreciate it. We'll see. They just get a little excited. You can't stop them sometimes. So anyway, right here we have by the way, in case you're wondering what we're looking at, these are just the transits of the moment. And it's always fun to check in with that, isn't it? Find out what's going on. As I was saying, this was a big day for me, right? Saturn went into Leo in my progressions, and I decided I was going to start my big locational astrology class today. Now, it's between 2 eclipses, and I have today, you're looking at it right now, some of the best transits I've ever had in my entire life for today. And I wanted to start my class today. This is what part of the fun we get to have with astrology. We get to look at good times to start things. Did this start at an auspicious time? Things like that. So the thing, and here's another lesson, right? And here's another example of how I teach astrology. You just have to learn every little thing. You just got to learn things as you go. So you generally never want to start anything around an eclipse that you want to last. Because eclipses are kind of, everything's just castles, built on sand kind of thing, really. We're kind of delusional. The energy's not very grounded. So I'm sorry, the greatest idea that that you've had for the last month and a half, if you don't ground it in some other way, it's starting off with a strike against it. Let's put it that way. And you'll generally find after eclipses have passed that you're able to be really sensible and rational about what's going on, basically. So you may have terrible ideas like this week. You might have terrible ideas this week. You may not, but you might, right? And so be careful of your ideas. Be careful of especially the new ideas. And you want to wait until at least a few days after the eclipse. A few days, I notice a difference at 3 days after the last eclipse in any series. That's going to turn out to be essentially the 24th of this month, January. We're talking here 2019. This will maybe on YouTube, so I have no idea when people might watch this. But anyway, that's going to be an interesting window there. And I wrote about that on my page. If you're looking for a good day to start something this month, check out my Facebook page. I guess I'll go ahead and flash you my wares here. So we have different things. I just started Instagram, so yay, I'm on Instagram. That's a fun thing. I am trying to get on there. I'm a dinosaur. What is it? That's my page. I didn't actually mean to be right there. But this is for. We go to my my astrology page on Facebook. So it's called Astrology: The Cosmic Mirror with Moses Siregar. You can just pull that up and follow me there if you want to. Same thing, I've got a Twitter. It's at Cosmirror, COSMIRROR. My internet is kind of slow right now, so I do apologize if we run into some issues with that. Anyway, here's my Twitter. You can follow that. Here's my Facebook. You can follow that. You can find all the good things at my website. That is astrologyforthesoul.com. We'll see how we're doing here. Checking the chat. All right, we're good. I did have a question. Do I use TNP and Uranian astrology? And I don't. And I'm pretty open-minded. I try not to be a jerk about what other people are into, you know? But I don't use those. Anyway, here's the website. It's a lot of fun. You can go up here to the link that says the latest, and you can always figure out what the latest stuff is that I'm doing. You know, I might have some free offerings or, you know, classes or webinars and all kinds of fun stuff. I've got a podcast coming up I'm going to be starting called the Holistic Astrology Podcast. Would love to have some people listen to that. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to do it with a lady named Emmeline Muldoon. She's wonderful. She's from England. She's a great astrology student, and we're working on that, so that's going to be coming up soon as well. Anyway, here's how you can find me, right? I think we've covered all that business. A couple other things real quick. A couple YouTube videos. You can find these on my website too. One of these I did just the other day with Gary Caton. He and I are kind of old friends, and I thought this was a really neat interview. Basically, he and I kind of went over his life, looked at the course of his life, and his locational astrology, and we had all kinds of neat conversations. He's a real smart guy, real cool guy. So this was neat. You can check that out. And one more thing here, this is going to be an interview I just did with Robert Kosmar on astrocartography. And if you haven't seen this one yet and you're interested in astrocartography, do watch this one, because I'm gonna go ahead and put the camera up so you can see my face. I got real opinionated on this one, you know. I played around and it's kind of fun. I kind of came out a little bit more fiercely about what I think about this subject, and that's ultimately what we're here to talk about today. So here I am. My Saturn has progressed into Leo. Leo can be a sign of a teacher. Why? Because it's ruled by the sun. The sun is the center of attention, right, in the solar system. So you'll see that a lot of Leos, whenever that's in their chart, essentially, right, Leos will put themselves out there, right? They'll say, oh, I'm going to teach this, or I'm going to lead this, I'm going to get up on a stage and do this performance or whatever, right? That's kind of the process of Leo, is you throw yourself out there. You probably are scared, you know, to do it in the first place, but you do it anyway, right? You put yourself out there, and this is kind of a funny image, isn't it? The funny pause. Anyway, let me switch the screen to something less silly. Here we go. And we throw ourselves out there, and we kind of, part of it is, of course, you kind of get the confidence along the way, right? You know, you do the thing you're scared to do, and then you get the confidence later. So back to the present here. Wonderful, incredible transits today, but I still decided not to do my class starting today because I just didn't want to risk the eclipses messing up what I hope will be the next big thing in my life, really. I mean, I've been doing this for a while, but now the teaching is the new thing. And so maybe that's what I'm sort of coming out with today. Yeah, so here we go. So anyway, powerful moment. Yesterday we had the Sun conjunct K2. The day before you would have felt that as well. Boy, that's really powerful and intense and transformational and spiritual. But you know what? I look at this as actually probably the big turning point for the month of January. I'm just going to say this real quick, and then we'll go to some location stuff. So I think what's going on here is the Sun has just passed K2. So we've just hit some kind of big transformational moment. And hopefully we've, done that well. Hopefully we've embraced what that is for us. And we've let go, we've moved forward, we've made the changes, we're stepping forward into something big. And it's just beautiful to see what's coming together right now. There's a full moon, lunar eclipse coming together. Let's animate this, and we'll show you the full moon coming together. This is just, if you don't appreciate this stuff, if you don't enjoy it, you're doing it wrong. So let's do it right. So here we go. We're getting close to the actual full moon. We see the moon is in Cancer, near the North Node. Getting close to an opposition with the sun. However, that's not even good enough, is it? Because we got to get that moon at 0 Leo, because that's where the full moon is. So there we go. Here's what the full moon lunar eclipse looks like, pretty much. Let's get it just slightly better, and we'll go Venus and Virgo on this one. I am the proud owner of Venus and Virgo, and I'm just trying to get the actual exact minute. So here's where it kicks in. Here's where the Virgo kicks in. We need the actual time. So we're just getting right to where the eclipse is happening, basically, and I'm looking at right when it's exact. So that's about 10:15 p.m. It's 10:16 Pacific time on the 20th on Sunday. We're just going to round up to 10:16. So anyway, that's what our full moon looks like right now. We're coming into this. It's a lunar eclipse. So it's big stuff, it's big transformation, and Uranus is squaring the nodes, squaring the sun and the moon. So basically, there's an incredible, this follows up the big changes from last year, right? Venus was retrograde, Uranus was involved with Venus, in opposition to Venus, right? This is after Mars was retrograde as well. So, a lot of relationships went through all kinds of stuff last year. And the Uranus piece to this just looks like a continuation of what was going on last year, where everything's changing, right? There's just big opportunities for this. So this is kind of exciting. I think right now, starting almost today, actually, I mean, you can see the day I chose to do this event, right? So starting about today, the sun is passing over K2 now. We're not quite getting creamed as much spiritually as we were the last few days, probably. And so now the question is, what is the new direction in your life? What's the big change you want to make? Because look at this timing. I think it's really neat. There's a Jupiter-Venus conjunction in Sagittarius, in tropical Sagittarius, right? Really strong Jupiter. That's in a trine to Mars and Aries. That's the dignity for Mars. So Mars and Venus and Jupiter are really working together here, and Jupiter and Mars have dignity. And then Venus gets in on the act just for fun. Let's add a little extra, sweetness to the mix here. So this is what's coming to fruition. What's this big change that we can all have that combines our courage and our independence with this Mars, right? And our whatever this sense of the Sagittarius piece of this is really interesting, because you can think of it on the one hand as just abundance, and it could be money, it could be love, it could be children, animals. It's funny, a friend of mine just picked up a couple animals. Anyway, this is the abundance of it all. And yet, what else is Sagittarius, and what is Jupiter in Sagittarius? It's not just about our egos, right? I mean, our egos love all the things we love. But what is Sagittarius really? What is Jupiter in Sagittarius really with Venus coming to it? All right? I mean, truth. What is Venus? Love, right? The heart. What is Mars here? Courage. I mean, there's a lot going on, on the national stage as well right now here in the U.S., but we'll stay away from that for now. Anyway, I find this really inspiring to think about what's this truth? Like, what is this higher truth, and how do I connect it to something that's passionate and powerful and meaningful, and go through this great massive change in my life? And, the full moon is in Leo. So it's lighting up us in how we want to express ourselves, how we want to be loved, how we want to, be known, how we want to be with children, right? I mean, there's that sense of play, there's that sense of self-expression. And so anyway, this is neat, because most eclipses don't look like this. Most eclipses don't look like they have this kind of potential. And so I've been looking at this month all month as probably this turning point. Maybe it's today. The sun passing K2. Maybe it takes another couple of days. Maybe it's just, the big turning point is 3 days after the eclipse. That's around the 24th. So anyway, you see I'm sharing this out of just pure, joy. I just love this stuff right now. And, it's funny because I've been doing astrology 25 years, and I've been through phases where I didn't love talking about it as much as I do right now, where I had to do other things. I had to write a couple novels. I wrote a couple epic fantasy novels inspired by mythology, like Greek mythology, Norse mythology. But I love talking about it. And the thing I really love talking about, as you may have guessed, is locational astrology. So let me check in with the chat window real quick, and we'll get going with that in a little bit here. Today, someone has K2 conjunct natal Mercury in the 4th house Cancer. Today opposite the sun. Oops, you meant Rahu. Okay. That makes more sense, doesn't it? There you go. Wow, interesting. Okay. So Rahu, the North Node, is on your natal Mercury in your 4th house in Cancer. Do you know if that goes into Gemini in, actually, I do have to ask you, does that go into Gemini in sidereal astrology? Anyway, one of the things that we're going to do at some point today is we're going to look at some charts. So I'm going to go ahead and open up for the next 5 minutes here. Yeah, if you want your chart looked at today, here's what I'd like you to do before everybody does anything here. First of all, you've got to know your birth time, and for this purpose, I want it to be only from a birth certificate. It's not because it's guaranteed to be your time if it's on a birth certificate, but it's that I don't want to do a reading for someone based on a time that's not real. And if someone else rectified it, I have no idea if they're any good, and maybe they're the greatest ever, and they had a bad day. I can't use a rectified time, and I can't use a time like 12 noon when you don't know anything. Right? And I can't use a time that you're guessing at. Basically, we have to use, at least maximize our chances of using real data, right? So for this, I'm going to ask for only people who know their birth time from a birth certificate, right? That's just that. I'm sorry if that excludes you today. That's just what I have to do to kind of protect myself, and to protect everybody else here too, because the whole point of this is to show you guys locational astrology. And if I show you locational astrology based on something that isn't even someone's birth time, it's going to be, no one's going to learn what we're supposed to learn, right? Now, what would it be like if we did that? What if someone gave you the wrong time? I'm just throwing out stuff to talk about. it'd probably be a bit like, well, it's a bit hit and miss. Wait, does this make sense? You know what I mean? That's what it's like usually. It's kind of hit and miss. If you get the real time, usually things just lock into place for every place that person has lived. Everything makes sense. And if you, that's what I do. And that's, by the way, one of the reasons I sleep well at night doing this work, because this work is a big deal. Like, I'm helping people figure out where to move. Someone may have lived somewhere for 60 years, right? In some frigid place. and I'm the one helping them figure out where they want to move to. It's so humbling. It's kind of nuts. Except that somebody has to do it, and I trust myself to do it. Right? That's basically it. Because I do care about this work. I mean, let me tell you real quick. I care so much about this work. If you have not heard me say this before, because this stuff matters. Where you live matters. Your life changes based on where you live. 100%. And it's very predictable. I'm not saying we get everything right every time. I'm not even saying that we can find perfection, right? Because we're human beings living on this earth. But we can find places that should work better for various people, right? And we can at least try to understand what it is. That's the thing. I can say, hey, you have this line here. I think it's like this. I'm pretty sure it's going to be like this, actually, but I could be wrong. So here's what it is. If you go there, you can figure out, if what I'm saying is true, first of all. You might visit for a week. You might visit for a month. You might even live there for a year or 10. But the thing is, my job isn't to tell you where to go. It's not to tell you what to think, obviously. My job really, as I see it, is to help people understand. And so people are starting to write their data into the chat. That's okay. But again, data with birth time from birth certificate, that's okay. We can leave your name out of it. Choose if you want your real name here or not. And we'll check that out in a second. So yeah, I love to distract myself with all of my shiny flashing things on my two computer screens here. I'm really good at doing that. Well, let me just go ahead and check the chat since I'm getting some messages in here. Okay, so we've got 1, we've got 2, we've got 3, we've got 4. That's 5. That is 6. Okay. 7. And 8. All right. I think we have 8. I'm gonna, if I have already done something like this for you, I'm gonna probably not call on you first. For a few reasons, I guess. Now that I think about it, one, I don't want you to be, some pre-planted person or something that, I mean, not that you would, be that, but we can look at anybody. I mean, I think you guys know I'm pretty honest about this stuff. I'll tell you what I think, essentially, right? So anyway, I was starting to say earlier, basically that's my job, is to be honest with you guys and tell you what I think, and not tell you where to go, but tell you, hey, here's where the line is, and here's what I think it's going to do, and here's what I think is the difference if you go east or west of it, and here's the difference of it, I think, if you go 50 miles north or south of it, and here's where this comes in, and here's the. So my job is to make sure you know what's there, and do my best to tell you succinctly what I think it means, and try to wrap it up and see the big picture, because there's always a lot of pieces to the puzzle in things like astrology, right? And I love this analogy Liz Green, I think, had for it in a book of hers a long time ago that I read when I was much younger. She talked about how astrology is kind of looking at a painting, looking at a chart's like looking at a painting. And I have no, my art appreciation skills are non-existent, but I mean, I can look at a painting and you essentially you go in and you look at a piece of it, is what she was saying, right? And then you zoom back out, and you go in and you look at a piece and you zoom back out. So ultimately in astrology, here's the thing. Everything is always both, right? We always have to do opposites. We always have to go in and understand every detail as well as we can, right? And we engage the Virgo for that, right? We call on our inner Virgo superpowers for that. And then we also need to step back and see the whole thing and use our heart, open up maybe to something, some kind of flow. Right. I don't, by the way, I don't do intuitive astrology. I don't sit here and tell you a message from your guides. No, I have done that. Like when I was younger, I used to do stuff like that and it was fun, but that's just not how I do astrology. Just so you know. Now, is there intuition in it? There's got to be intuition in it. I mean, right. So yeah. Why am I guided when I look at that map to go, oh, wait a minute, let's just look at a map. Jeez, I've been blabbing on this whole time. I haven't even shown you guys a map yet. So let's just look at an astro map. This is going to be solar maps. So little program that's bundled in with solar fire. It used to be you had to buy it separately, no longer the case. So here we go. So I'll just put my thing on the screen for a sec. Just this is my map. Okay, this is where my stuff is, right? So you can see things like, for example, I wasn't really planning on talking about this too much, but here, my sun was at the midheaven, or literally when I was born. Okay, so let's go back to 1975, and little baby Moses is drawing his first breath over in New Jersey, and it's in the middle of the day. So the sun's near the midheaven at high noon, right here. All right, this is this red line. This is the highest the sun can travel, in any given sky that day, right? But in these places, right? So if I had been born in Biloxi, Mississippi, okay, if I had been born in the middle of Illinois, Carbondale, right? Then at that moment, the sun would have been as high as it could have been at that on that day and in that place, and therefore, we look at these lines. And they're still there. They're always there. Here's the amazing thing about this stuff. It's always there. These things never change. These things never change. Now, other things change. So it's not that there isn't change. These things don't change. And these lines are always extremely powerful. Every single person. You give me their birth time. You give yourself their birth time, and you look at this stuff every single time. It is going to be crazy, crazy powerful. That's why this stuff is not hard to do. It's not hard to sell because it works. The key is trying to figure out how it works, and that's the tricky part because astrology is complicated. I've been doing it a long time. I think it's part of my responsibility to study the Western and Vedic traditions. For one, I believe in that totally. And here, I'm just going to go ahead and drop an opinion bomb on you guys, okay? There are how many people in India practicing this kind of astrology? There are how many people in the West practicing tropical Western astrology? And are you going to tell me all those other people are crazy? And you and all your people who are the same kind of color as you are not crazy? No. No. You're touching different parts of the elephant. I like to look at the whole elephant because people try to make decisions about where to move based on my opinions of reading these squiggles on a screen based on where the planets were when they were born. On one hand, it's absurd. On the other hand, it works and it works and it works and it works and it works. And it works every day. So here I am, right? So we're gonna try to illustrate some of this, right? And I'm taking a risk here just by sort of taking a random person. Here's the other thing. I like to help people. So if I can do a little promotional thing for my class here, which is what I'm doing today, basically, right? I'm trying to say hello to everybody and say, here, this is me. This is how I do my work. And I'd like to hang out with you. I'd like to hang out with you in a class. I'd like to do a reading with you. I'd like to, whatever. I'm gonna start doing I'm gonna do a retreat probably this year in Prescott, Arizona, with a friend of mine. She's a yoga teacher. And we're going to do a retreat with the theme of a life purpose kind of theme and pull in some other teachers as well. I've got another person in mind, another really great lady. And anyway, that's going to be in Prescott, Arizona. So this is the stuff that I'm up to. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pull up a random number generator online. And we're going to do some randomness and figure out whose chart we're going to play around with. Because, hey, if someone can get something really valuable out of this today, that's great. And obviously I'm trying to illustrate how these things work. And again, the great thing about all of this is that it always works. It's so cool. So, we get to just get a little taste of that today. All right, I'm going to count again and see how many people are here. And then we're going to go from there. Okay, I think we got to count over again. I think there might be some people in here more than once. Let me see. All right, so we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm not doing any rectifications. 6. I think it's 6. Okay, there's someone sent me a rectified time according to birth certificate. Okay, that's fine. It's actually not a big deal. Sorry, I got to count over again then. This should not be hard. 1, 2. Okay, so we got. I'm gonna say the names. Actually, go ahead and say if it's not okay to say your name. Go ahead and say that, because otherwise I'm gonna say your name. Okay. So we got T. We have another T. We have S. We have C. We have another C. We have a K. We have an E. All right. There's an L. Okay, that's 8. All right. So I'm gonna go ahead and generate a random number between 1 and 8, and we're gonna see what happens here. Boom, boom, boom. The number is 3. Does this work for us? Let's see who this is. If it's someone I've already worked with, I may not call on you right now. All right, so we got 1. Okay. Name starts with an S. Is it okay to say your name? If so, it looks like we got your data here. Have I worked with you before? I'd rather work with someone I haven't worked with before, just to be fair and transparent and all that good stuff. So let's go ahead here and say, I'm going to say this is an S right here. And I'm going to actually ask if this person is here. If this person isn't here, maybe they walked away or something. That's okay, obviously, but then we don't want to jump into this. So let's look at this here. Okay. Okay, so good. So, all right, so I can say your name here. So this is Sarah. We'll just keep it as Sarah. All right, so Sarah, you could, if you wish, turn on your mic and talk here as well. I can turn up my my speakers so you could do that. You can also just chat with me here as well, and because I'll be asking you questions and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and double check the data here. We've got you March 10th, 67, 8:13 p.m. Rochester, New York. That looks groovy. So what I do here, I pull up the charts. And I pull up the tropical chart, and then right below it, I pull up the sidereal chart. So you're always going to see me do that. The sidereal chart, we just click this button here in SolarFire. It just toggles between your sidereal and tropical zodiac. I'm using the Lahiri Ayanamsha, which is the most typical, though it's not necessarily the only Ayanamsha you should be using. But that's another story for another day. I do think Lahiri is perfectly great to use, though. But so we have Sarah here, and you would rather use the chat. That's okay. Thank you for letting me use your name. All right, so Sarah, tell me what you'd like to know. I'd like to know where you are currently, how long you've been there maybe, and depending on how many places you've lived, even just write out a quick little history of all the places that you've lived. Actually, just go ahead and type out, if you don't mind, just the towns you lived in, literally. So, Boston, Massachusetts, and just a list of places. Now, if it's like 20 or 30 places or something, obviously we're not going to look at all those. But some people have just, lived in 1 or 2 or 3 places. So, okay, so we've got Santa Fe, San Francisco, Seattle, and Ann Arbor. All right, let's go ahead and pull some of these up. And part of what we're going to do here, this is a little bit of my process of looking at the past. See if I can keep this camera up here. And it's a little tough at the moment. The camera thing is not in the recording at the moment. Anyway, let's get this info in here. So we've got Santa Fe, and we can look at the past here, make sure things make sense. That's obviously where we want to start. If I look at your past and you tell me what happened when you lived in Seattle, and I would have told you the complete opposite, then there's a problem. So we got to figure that out if that happens. Luckily, that doesn't happen, so often. But of course, these things happen, and sometimes it's just a matter of not understanding the place. Maybe it was a whole complicated thing, and well, you focused on only the good parts, and I see only the bad parts, or I focused on only the bad parts, and you only mentioned the good parts, or so. Anyway, we got to figure these things out, right? We got to get calibrated to you, your chart, your astrology, your Vedic chart, your Western chart, all this stuff. Once I get calibrated to you and your astrology, presumably we're good to go as far as being able to figure out, what future options look like for you, and at least get really good leads, at least get really good ideas for things for you to check out based on certain things you might want or need. Okay, so Sarah, curious what you might like to talk about. What is your current town in Vermont? I definitely want to see that one, and how long you've been there. Yeah, I think we've got so far the places that you have lived. Yeah, because there was we got it. Okay, so Montpelier. I don't know how to say it, but I'm guessing it's Montpelier, right? Unless you would say it more correctly. Okay, Montpelier, Vermont. There we go. Since 2009. Okay, so this is a place that Sarah has been for a while. So Sarah, you lived in Santa Fe, San Francisco, Seattle, Ann Arbor. Is there one or two of those places where you have lived way more? Maybe you lived, most of your life, practically all your life in one of those places. That we could look at that. So anyway, here is her chart relocated for Vermont, and obviously the particular town in Vermont. She has some very strong lines. She's got some really strong lines here. This is going to be really interesting to talk about. So this is kind of a complicated cluster, right, Sarah? Because there's a lot going on here in this chart. Now, one of my teachings is that this is my new teaching thing. I'm trying to make this a little bit more understandable. That's really the goal here. I want the things that I am offering to be understandable, and I want to help more astrologers understand how to do these things. Because I sit here every day trying to figure out how to do this stuff. And if we don't figure out how to do this stuff, we start sending people all over the place, and it's probably the really bad karma, right? If you send someone somewhere and it's the opposite of what you said it was going to be, I have gotten a number of clients from other people where they've literally come to me and said, I went there and literally is the opposite of what the guy said it was going to be. And I swear to you, in every case, I could look at that and it was not hard to see why. It really wasn't. There's just a lot of people out there that don't quite know their stuff. There's a lot of people that don't know. You can't go say, oh, go relocate to where your fallen planet is on an angle and everything's going to be great. Now, that's not to say you can't ever live in a place with a planet on a fallen angle. In fact, I moved to Hawaii and met my wife the first day I got there where my Venus was rising. Venus in Virgo. She's kind of a triple Virgo. So I met my Venus, my first wife there. We were together for 19 years. I also could not live there. Everything was wonderful with her for 2.5 years. We had like a 2.5 year honeymoon living in paradise. I don't know. I'm lucky. I was 24. This is what happened, right? But 19 years later, we're actually splitting up. And it's kind of interesting because it was a Jupiter-Saturn cycle that we met under, which is about a 20-year cycle. And so it's also been a complete nodal cycle. So even in my own case, Venus in Virgo, we weren't together forever, right? We're divorcing. We had 19 pretty great years, 3 great kids, lots of great times. Can't complain, right? But I couldn't live there. I had to leave Hawaii because everything with my partner at the time was great. And everything in my personal life was terrible. I could not, my Venus in Virgo did not work there for me because it was on my ascendant, okay? The ascendant is like you. It's like how you meet people, your physical presence in the world. Are you successful? Venus in Virgo, that's a Venus that, I have that issue with Venus. I have to learn how to receive because my Venus is in Virgo. Serving other people is not hard. In fact, I'm really good at it, right? But the Venus part is challenging. And, being 43, you learn a lot. You get a lot better at it, trust me. But how was that for me? Well, I couldn't live there. My social life was terrible. My work was terrible. I met, my wife. That was wonderful. But I couldn't live there, right? So would I go back and live in Hawaii now? No. I could go back there to my Venus line and probably meet another woman who has a lot of Virgo in her chart or something like that, right? Nothing wrong with that. I have Venus in Virgo. But still, these things are powerful. So so anyway, I'd mentioned on another YouTube recently that a story of an astrologer, it was always recommending these Moon and Scorpio placements. And I would get some of his clients would come back to me and say, why are all the places that I'm going to terrible? And it's the opposite of what he said it was going to be. And I'm spending all this time and all this money. That's insane, right? It's really, it's heartbreaking to think about that. Now, I'm not claiming I'm perfect, okay? But I'm trying. I'm trying to get this right. That's for darn sure. And I always give my time to it because it's that important, because it's your life. But there's things that you have to avoid, and there's things you have to understand carefully. And astrology is not easy. It is not an easy subject. I've been studying this a long time. I feel like I've got a handle on a lot of it, obviously, enough to do this work, which is a big freaking deal. But we have to study everything we can, and we have to be as thorough as we can and look at as much as we can. And I'm always trying to do better. I'm always trying to do better for my clients. I'm always trying to push myself. I think my knowledge of the astrology is in a good place. I can know how to do the astrology part of it. It's just, how do we do even more? How do we, make sure we're not messing anything up? So there has to be that ethic in this work, and that ethic has not been there in this work. In fact, there's a lot of people, not really through their own fault, but they see these maps and they think that they should say, oh, I should go move to this line, or you should go move to this line. And it's absolutely the wrong way to do this. Now, the maps are useful and they can tell us a lot. But anyway, let's get back to Vermont and we'll look at Sarah here. So Sarah, so no comments from you yet. So I'm curious, in a little bit, I'll be curious to hear your comments here about Vermont. And here's what I notice. So we have, first of all, this Venus descending line. This is a Venus descending line for her. It is awfully, awfully powerful. It is a really strong line. Jupiter at the midheaven is also not far away. That is another massively powerful line. This is Jim Lewis's Astrocartography. It's pretty simple. It's really powerful. Where are the planets on the angles? Where were they when Sarah was born, right? So we have a very strong Venus energy, and we have a very strong Jupiter energy here. Now, you might think that might be really great, and it might be, because Venus and Jupiter are more benevolent sort of planets. They are generally easier to work with. But you always have to look at every chart. Some Jupiters are terrible. Some Venuses are terrible. You do not want to say, oh, let's go to my Jupiter line when you have a terrible sort of Jupiter. Now, terrible is an awfully harsh word, isn't it? But I'm being harsh because I want people to understand that you can't just move to your Jupiter line. Of course, it's not terrible. Nothing's really good or bad. You've got your Jupiter for a reason, whether it's good, bad, or something mixed or whatever, right? You know, this is also about honoring the sacredness of life and the fact that our lives are revealed through astrology. Astrology is just a mirror of us. One of the channels I used to read said that it's basically God / the universe / our angels / our guides / whatever you believe in. It's kind of the way that the universe can actually try to talk to us. It's one of the ways the universe can try to talk to us, and it's in code. But that's what's fun about this. We get to try to crack the code a little bit, and you know, if we stay humble and work hard at it, we'll benefit ourselves through this. So here's this Venus and Jupiter line. They're really strong lines. So now we can look at this and say, well, for Sarah, you know, should she be on a Venus line? Should she be on a Jupiter line? Do we like her Venus? Do we like her Jupiter? Things like this. Now here's where I'm going to look at this, you know, in a Vedic sense and in a Western sense. And so I'm trying to decide right now if I want to kind of get into that analysis right here, right now. Let's do a little bit of that. So Sarah, you've obviously offered yourself as a guinea pig here. Thank you for your courage. Right. So I'm going to go ahead and full disclosure. Sarah did tell me something that has happened here in Vermont in the text before I mentioned some of the problems I see in the chart. And I'll show you exactly where I saw the problems in the chart for Vermont. She said she got divorced in Vermont, but I live next door to my ex. Oh, okay. The job's amazing, but also always precarious. Okay. So here's basically, let me just cut to the chase real quick for those who know some of this stuff. This is a technique that I use. I have essentially discovered this, and it's such a, I don't know, I feel cheesy saying that, but I've not discovered anything that other people haven't sort of put together. It's just that in this particular application, I have. Because I can make it really clear how this works with one of the things that we see here in a relocated chart. Now, let me tell you, too, the reason I know how this works, the reason I sort of discovered this, is literally just because I was looking at charts. I was actually teaching a class at the time. I'll tell you the story real quick. So there was a student in my class. She had some kind of really gnarly Sun-Pluto kind of thing. I think it was a Sun-Pluto square. I mean, this was a long time ago, so I don't remember the details. But it was a Sun-Pluto square. It involved the 5th house and the 8th house. Now, before I learned this, what I thought is that the houses matter in the way that we typically think they matter. They don't actually matter in the way they typically think they matter in locational astrology. That's my opinion. What actually matters are certain key, highly sensitive points. At least I can say they matter much more than the general things. Okay. So, for example, for Sarah here, there's a couple house systems that I use for this. Okay. So I use equal house and I use porphyry. Porphyry is just a simple trisection of each quadrant. That's what we see here for Sarah in Vermont. We go from 18 to 19, 19 to 20, 20 to 21, basically, right? You see how that's working? So these houses are all 31 degrees wide in porphyry for Sarah in Montpelier, Vermont. So porphyry is mathematically simple. Another mathematically simple house system is equal house. This is the other one that I use. We have the degree of the ascendant. In this case, it's 18 Libra. That's her relocated ascendant for this particular place in Vermont. So in equal house, let me just show you visually what that looks like. Every Every house is going to be 30 degrees wide, and we're going to have the degree of the rising degree on the cusp of every house. So we have 1807 on every house cusp. These are the two house systems that I use when it comes to the house cusps. I also use whole sign houses. So in terms of whole sign houses, that's a different approach. It's more of a... I use it more, honestly... It comes into play in locational astrology, particularly when it comes to the natal chart, understanding the natal chart. It's not all that useful in actual locational astrology beyond that, though, because there's not a lot of change. Like if we look at where you have Leo rising, it could be like most of the country, most of the U.S. or half of it, roughly. And then, the other half is whatever. It's going to be Cancer or Virgo. But it's only so useful, really. The things that I think are more useful are the really pinpointed things. When you see really specific things, then it gets really interesting. So let's see this here, right? So here we have an 18-degree ascendant. So the idea here is that anything near 18 degrees is highly sensitive. It's highly, highly active, activated, powerful, the story, the big deal, the whole... The enchilada, I don't know, I'm being silly. It's a lot, okay? That's the big deal. And when I got into this, I thought like everybody else thinks. I thought, oh, the planets in the middle of the house are a big deal. They hardly matter in locational astrology. I'm not saying they don't. They do. But they matter in a background kind of way. They matter in a sense that's more like, here's a theme. Now, if you have a stellium, that matters. Stellium's 3 or 4, 3 planets or more basically in a house. Yes, if that's in the middle of a house and it's in the middle of your 12th house, yeah, you're having a 12th house experience. But is that particularly acute? No, it's actually not. It's not that strong. It doesn't hit you that hard. It's not the good thing that hits you for better or for worse, I guess. That's what I'm saying. It's not the good or the bad thing that hits you that hard. It's just a powerful thing. In general, in the background. Because it's a stellium. Okay, but the specific stuff is more significant. So what's going on for Sarah? And why is Vermont so messed up for Sarah? I hope you don't mind me using that terminology, Sarah. I would probably not use that in a real session, but I'm being a bit flippant here on YouTube or whatever. So look at the degree 18, right? And let's go back to the porphyry, because now we can see this equal house chart, right? You can kind of imagine in your head 18 degrees everywhere if you want to. This is tropical. You can do sidereal too. It doesn't matter. All right, we'll go back to porphyry. All right, now we've got the porphyry chart up because while we can see, we can basically see the equal house chart in our mind. 18 degrees rising, 18 degrees is everywhere. The question to ask ourselves now is which planets are within 5 degrees of these degrees? The porphyry cusps and the equal house cusps. And if you find one that's within 1 degree, or 2 maybe, but 1, boy, have we got a really strong theme. And that is going to be super predominant. This is super important. And frankly, I don't think a whole lot of people know it. In fact, I know they don't. And this is the thing that I figured out. And it's really, really, really important. It works so consistently. And again, I didn't discover this in a sense that like, when I found this working, and I'm sorry, I'll go back to the story from the class. The student in the class had a Sun-Pluto square involving the 5th and 8th houses. The thing was, she had a major stalker problem, all right? And I noticed how close they were to the cusps. And I thought, okay, that's interesting. And then I started watching, and sure enough, every time you put those planets on those cusps, the really big stuff happens. And it becomes one of the big things you have to look at. So when we look at Sarah in Vermont, 18 degrees. What's near 18 degrees? Her moon at the 6th house position, right? Her sun at the 6th house position as well. Now, Sarah's born just before a new moon, like the very, very end, like literally 3 hours roughly from the actual new moon. Okay, so that's another story. What are the moon and sun doing for her? They are opposed by what? Pluto. 19 degrees too. I mean, this is a remarkably strong opposition for you, Sarah. The sun and the moon, right? In a conjunction. That's the mother and the father, the male and the female, your anima and your animus, they're in this incredible conjunction there. In your chart, they're opposed by Pluto. So obviously, we would assume generally from your life, something about mom and dad was not quite perfect, right? Maybe there was a serious, trauma or ending or death or a big power struggle. Pluto's famous for those as well, right? But there's basically something here, and we're getting into stuff we shouldn't get into here. There may be things that are serious, like serious things that this represents, like very serious or traumatic things that this could represent. A place like Montpelier, Vermont. Sarah said that's about right to something I said 3 minutes ago. Sorry. I'm sorry. I got to look at the chat over there, but I'll stick to this for a minute. So, the Sun, Moon opposite Pluto. Now, what else is significant about this for Vermont? Now, again, typical. This is kind of awesome, Sarah, that you gave me this example, because this is kind of the perfect example of what I want to show people, or one of the things I want to show. You've got this Venus descending line. You know what people would say about that? Oh, everything's great for your relationships. You got a divorce there, right? I mean, Jupiter's at the midheaven. Oh, everything should be great. Jupiter's at the midheaven. Well, there are good things from your Venus, and there are good things from your Jupiter. Like, for example, what you said about Jupiter, you said that's about right, that it is effed up here for me. Yeah, no, it's effed up here for you. It's totally effed up. This is not good, because, go back to some of your notes, I think. Let's see. Your job is amazing, but also always precarious. So what's the midheaven in astrology? Job, career, right? There's Jupiter. Oh, Jupiter's protective, right? It's going to make everything hunky-dory. Well, her job is amazing. So yeah, this is significant in terms of the good job. What are some of the issues with this? Well, isn't Jupiter in Cancer? Isn't it exalted? Shouldn't that be just good? Not exactly. And we see a few issues. The fact that it's retrograde does complicate it. In fact, the fact that it's retrograde does give some challenging results to Jupiter here, because it's exalted. The retrograde gives it some opposite results. Therefore, it takes on some challenges, as if Jupiter were in Capricorn, essentially. That's another story, but that's a very important principle. Also, Jupiter isn't a square to Venus. It's a 6-degree square. It's not the tightest square, but it's a square. So Jupiter and Venus here are in a relationship to each other and kind of helping each other, because they're both friendly folks. But they're also at odds a little bit. And so the benevolence, the abundance, all that Jupiter wants to give here is a little bit limited by Venus over there. And Venus, all the love and all the happiness and all the joy and sweetness she wants, well, Jupiter gives her a lot of that sometimes, because Jupiter gives an abundance of things. And it is a happy, jolly, kind of friendly kind of planet. Jupiter is also too much of a good thing. And sometimes with Venus, Jupiter here, there is something a little off, basically, right? So we see a number of principles in this chart. That an angular planet is not necessarily good. It's often good and bad. It's often a mixture of things. That's typically what it is. Because her Venus is square to Jupiter, it's going to give her some things, and it's going to make things excessive. Like whatever Jupiter gives to her Venus, too much of a good thing maybe. For example, Sarah, like a Venus line for a woman, you're typically going to have female friends. You're typically going to have sisters, close sisters. I would say that is true like 95 out of 100 times if you look at a Venus line for women. You can comment here if that's true or not for you, but because of the aspect from Jupiter, I wonder if it's like a lot of women or a group or connected to a spiritual thing, or what is that? We're going to see some kind of Venus Jupiter story about that, and I'll see if you make a comment on that, and I'll share that if you do. But anyway, I could look at this chart in a New York minute and know that this is not good. I have some relatives in New York. I'm probably allowed to say that, but anyway, the Sun Moon. I didn't mention this part of it, which is they're on the cusp of the 6th house and the cusp of the 12th house. That is the elephant in the room. I also should have mentioned previously. The 6th house is very challenging. The 12th house is very challenging. They're also good. All houses are good for certain things. The 12th house is really good for kind of getting your butt kicked spiritually and becoming very, very humble and having to surrender because your ego gets humbled because things don't go the way you want. So for Sarah, now here's part of the precariousness, actually, of her job. Pluto and Uranus are in Virgo. Uranus makes things change. Virgo is about work. They are connected to the 12th house, which symbolizes loss, which symbolizes... so I may have been wrong about something. I'm going to be curious about your comments here. This is interesting. Okay, so Pluto, Uranus, anyway, in Virgo, a sign of work. With the 12th house, there's more loss. That's the sense that she's not in control of her work. The sense that she's not having, she's got the great job with Jupiter at the midheaven, but here's this Virgo issue with the Uranus kind of making it tricky. So let's see what's going on with the woman here. Now, part of what's going on is that the moon is also in a very tough place, and that's also related to women. Let's see what Sarah said here. Actually, for me, I had a powerful betrayal by a woman and also some deep friendships, but they are, quote, free to leave, and I remain here mainly because of my kids. Okay. So we're talking about friendships with women. Okay. So the powerful betrayal by a woman, where could we see that? I don't think it's coming... It may be from Venus because of the quincunx to Pluto and Uranus, come to think about it. Look at that, right? There's a 150-degree angle between Venus, Pluto, and Uranus. I did focus on Jupiter in that aspect, because that's a traditional aspect, and I'm doing a basic lecture. But in reality, if I see Venus configured with Pluto and Uranus like this, I'm going to... And I think you guys can see, sort of the mistake I made a minute ago, which is just sort of looking at the Venus-Jupiter and not looking at how this is connected to this. I also said the moon is an issue, for sure. The moon is related to women. The moon is with the 6th house. What is the 6th house about? It's where relationships are hard. It's where we're not compatible with the people that we're in relationship with. We don't get along with the people we work with typically so much either. Or at least we have, theoretically, some issues can happen in work too. There can be health issues in the 6th house, more acute, stressful types of health issues. And so anyway, her sun and moon are there. Now, the thing about a serious betrayal that does make a lot of sense, right? Okay, there's another good point she's saying here too. The thing that makes one of the things that makes a lot of sense about this here is I'm just going to skip right to her comment because it is really useful. So it happened while Uranus was transiting her Venus in Aries, and her Venus and yours are conjunct. Okay, so in fact, clearly Venus was related to this, right? And you did have this significant other woman in your life. Now, I'll tell you. 95 times out of 100, women go to Venus lines, and they'll tell you that they have great female friends. So this is cool. I like exceptions. Exceptions are where we learn how to not just follow the general guidelines that are not always true, right? So do we see betrayal here from a woman? We absolutely see this a lot of ways. Venus is in a quincunx to Pluto, quincunx to Uranus, but mostly Pluto. Does that sound like betrayal? With the 12th house involved, yes. The moon is also women. Now here we get into the sun and moon. The sun and moon gets into your mother and your father. So now we get into betrayal or trauma or pain that could go back all the way back to your parents. And the thing is, your parents have trauma too, right? So you inherit something from your parents because they had something from their parents, and they got something from their parents, and welcome to the human race, right? So do we see betrayal here, though? This moon, this very dark moon, that's the thing. It's a dark moon, okay? I'm also born during the dark of the moon. And it gets a bit of a bad rap, especially if you look at like something Vedic astrology, more traditional astrology. The bright moons, the full moons, those are the ones that are really, often regarded as the cool thing to have, right? And it is kind of true. A full moon is a brighter, stronger kind of personality. Like that person is showing up in life in a different, bolder kind of way. But us dark moon types, there's more going on, maybe a little bit on the inside, the spirit level, whatever. Like we're a little more tuned to the darkness, right? We're not quite as, hey, look at me all the time. Even when you're a Leo like me, right? It's like, no, I have a Cancer moon. It's a dark Cancer moon, Scorpio rising. I like my little space to myself too, So anyway, that's what a dark moon is like. But it is more sensitive because you're born in a time of life that's not quite as full, quite as abundant, You're born in a time of life when maybe things are a little dark. Maybe things are a little bit sad, I mean, I was born into sad circumstances. I can say that, And so this kind of moon here is very, very sensitive, right? It's extremely sensitive. Oh, by the way, and it's also in Pisces, right? And it's right there with the sun. And it's very, very dark. And it's, by the way, very much opposed by Pluto. Pluto's very much with the 12th house, with Uranus. So we see why this is not an easy place for Sarah, and why I would say, Sarah, if you had come to me in the past and said, should I move to Montpelier, Vermont? Now, obviously, you've been meant to be there for whatever reason. I'm just saying, if you had come to me, what would I have probably said? I would have told you how freaking intense it's going to be, and that you might have some amazing kind of friendships that you make with women there. But, and I think I would have said this, and I may be wrong, I may be lying to myself, but I think I would have said that it's too strong. And actually, I say that every day, so I know I would have said that. The Venus line here is too strong. Like, you are too close to it because Venus is not a spotless planet for you. Now, what else do we notice about Venus here? Let's get back into the sidereal a little bit. Where is Venus going to be in her sidereal chart? Pisces, right? because when we go to Vedic astrology, we're using a different reference point for the start of the zodiac. It's not a big deal, people. It's not a big deal. In the West, we say, hey, let's start the zodiac when the sun is at the vernal equinox. We're going to say that is 0 Aries. That's going to be our zodiac. Cool. That's your zodiac. Have fun. It's great. I love the tropical zodiac. I also love sidereal zodiacs. And what the issue in a sidereal zodiac, which is a giant pain in the butt, is they have to say in a sidereal zodiac, and this is not a problem in tropical astrology. This is one of the nice things about tropical astrology. You don't have to deal with this Ayanamsha garbage, right? Is you got to figure out, where does your zodiac start? Oh, there are the stars, right? There's Leo, there's Scorpio, there's the constellations you're looking at. But how do we say where exactly is 0 Leo or 15 Leo or any point? How do we say where it is exactly? So it's kind of neat. In India, the government of India has officially recognized the Lahiri Ayanamsha as the official, kind of Ayanamsha of India, which is amazing, right? Imagine Donald Trump, our U.S. government saying, you know what? Our official zodiac is the tropical zodiac. I don't know. It's real different, isn't it? And Lahiri is cool because it uses the star Chitra, we call it in the West. I'm sorry, sorry. Spica, we call it in the West. Chitra, they call it in the East, in India. And this is considered a very auspicious nakshatra. So they use that star, which is considered very auspicious, as the basis for the zodiac. And what it is that star becomes the very, very, very end of Virgo. Like 29, 59 Virgo. That's how the Lahiri Ayanamsha works. Okay. Anyway, we have to pay attention here, too, to the fact that when we go to her Venus, and we look at Sarah's Venus, it is in Pisces in her Vedic chart, in her 7th house with Saturn. And they are forming what we would call a Raja Yoga Karaka, Raja Yoga. They're combining the houses, the 9th house, which Venus rules, and Saturn is the lord of the 5th here. These are houses of Dharma. Positive, auspicious, benevolent, good energy, okay? This is in her 7th house of marriage, however. And Saturn is there, and Venus is there. So, you may have heard relationships are a little challenging for human beings. And we see the good and the bad here. We see good stuff. Like Sarah... okay, hang on. So Sarah... now that I look at it again, and I see that really powerful Venus line that you have there, and I see the exalted Venus in your Vedic chart, I am wondering about other things too. Like, did you benefit financially from the marriage, right? What is the Venus part of this? Because there should be good Venus here too. Maybe there's something really artistic or spiritual that's really pronounced in your life in Vermont, but it should have something to do with the relationship. Now, let's also talk about the fact that Venus is in Aries, because this is considered the detriment, quote unquote, for Venus in a lot of the traditional Western astrology. And I'm going to turn off my ringer. This is the detriment for Venus in traditional Western astrology. It's kind of neat that this concept doesn't really exist in Vedic astrology. There's no concept of the detriment like this. I'm not saying that it doesn't matter. I am saying I don't think it matters a whole lot, but it does matter some. And so Venus in Aries is considered not in her best sign by the Western astrologers, because Venus, and Sarah mentioned that her and her friend had Venus conjunct Venus. So this is kind of interesting, because on the one hand, there's this Venus in Aries dimension to this relationship for them. On the other hand, there's this Venus in Pisces dimension to the relationship for them. And on the Aries side, right, Aries can show up as this sort of, often as this spunky, impulsive, fiery, kind of woman, right? But it can be intense. And so obviously there's some intensity in this betrayal for Sarah. Now, Venus in Pisces is capable of a lot of feeling. It's also capable of a really incredible connection, really, connections that are very spiritual, very sweet, loving, money, whatever. So I'm curious what, okay, so Sarah says, my ex is a mixed bag in terms of benefits. There are some benefits for sure, including the house that I ended up with. Okay, so because of that exalted Venus, that's what probably suggested to me that you're getting something from that relationship, at least, Anyway, we're looking at a lot of things here, and we're seeing why this is this isn't Vermont, rather. This is Rochester, where you're born. But anyway, why Vermont was such a wild place. We were getting into that Venus in Aries thing. So personally, I don't think, if you have a planet in its detriment, I do not think you should inherently be worried about moving to that line. It's not a point in favor of the planet, but it's not a big deal against it. Now, A planet in its fall is completely the opposite. You've got to make a huge distinction in your mind between a planet in its fall and a planet in its detriment. Detriment isn't that big of a deal. It can be, especially if the planet has other stuff going on. This is a good example of that. Venus is in Aries, so we're like, okay, maybe Venus is a problem. Think of it that way. A planet is in its detriment. We go, wait, maybe this is going to be a problem. Maybe it's kind of a problem, but maybe it's not a big deal. Well, then we look for other stuff. And I think this quincunx to Pluto is huge. And there's even, I don't talk about semisextiles ever, but this is a semisextile. Venus and your moon. And they're not, and the sun too. I actually have this in my chart, a 30-degree separation with Venus and the sun. They're doing two different things there. They're sitting next to each other around the wheel, right, in the circle. And so being next to each other, they can't quite see each other. I was talking to a friend last night about how you play two keys on a piano together, and it's really, it's not good, right? That's kind of the quality of two signs that are next to each other. So there's something between Venus and the moon here. They're both at 18. Well, how's the moon doing? Well, she's very dark, opposed by Pluto and Uranus. How's Venus doing here? She's in a quincunx to Pluto, and she has this interesting thing with this semisextile kind of thing with the sun and moon. And it's showing that there's like two parts to Sarah, right? For me, for example, sun in Leo, Venus in Virgo. Two pretty different parts of me, really. Well, for Sarah, Venus in Aries, moon and sun in Pisces. So, that Aries part of Sarah is like that spunky, fiery, impulsive, passionate, wild, pioneering, whatever, right? That Aries energy. And then what's the Pisces part? Yeah, it's going to be more sensitive, obviously. It's going to have a different kind of depth to it in terms of like an emotional hang out with you kind of depth. It's a different thing, Aries will excite you, right? It'll lift you up and things will be fun, whatever. Pisces is a whole different thing. Hanging out with a Pisces is per se is a whole different thing. But these are two very important parts of Sarah. And even understanding herself as a woman, her moon in Pisces and her Venus in Aries, two very important parts of her. Kind of getting off on a tangent, but you can see I like talking about all this stuff, right? So, but anyway, boy, Vermont is pretty messed up. And it's too strong. That's what I know I would have told her. The Venus line is too strong there. And I think I would have certainly noticed, it's in this quincunx to Pluto. Now I'm really not comfortable because now it's a really strong Venus line and there's this Pluto thing. At the same time, her Venus is doing a lot better in Vedic astrology. So I'm not overly concerned, and I do think some really good things are going to come out of this for her. But do I recommend living here? Oh, no way. Look at this sun and moon. That's your heart and your soul. They're with the 6th house for her there. So how easy is it to get along with men when your sun's with the 6th house cusp? Not. How easy to get along with women, for that matter, with the moon, with the 6th house cusp there? Maybe not. And obviously in this case, not, with at least that one woman. That's really strong. That means that there's stress. That means that you're working too hard. That means relationships are hard. It also means you're learning a lot of lessons. It also means you could be doing some good things for yourself and learning some things you need to learn for yourself and taking care of yourself. We get into the positives too. What's the strategy for the 6th house? How do you maintain yourself? How do you do your disciplines, right? How do you maintain your work? That's important. But it's being opposed by this Uranus and Pluto in Virgo at the 12th house. So here's the transpersonal planets, the outer planets. What do? They take all... They are more powerful than you. They're more powerful than your ego. When they want you to change and grow, guess what's going to change? And guess what's going to grow? You in your life, right? Anyway, connected with the 12th house, it's taking away control over work a little bit, health possibly in Virgo too. And generally, it's causing those issues for the sun and moon, for her domestic self. That's the moon, right? Her Sarah is part of her that is a wife, a woman, whatever, in a relationship. The sun, obviously also is a lot about her connection with her power and with men. And this place makes this very tough. Now, the 6th and 12th houses can be about selfless service. We're being a bit Pollyanna right now. We're saying, yeah, this could be really good for service and selfless service. True. That's what you got to kind of try to think about if you're living there. This 12th house means, the ego's got to come off, just off with the ego. Like, it's not about you when you got a placement like that somewhere. And that's the thing is people don't really like that. We don't really like it when we don't have power and control over stuff in our lives. And understandably so. Because that 12th house is challenging, right? Now, again, we can't really judge what's right and what's wrong. Sarah's on a spiritual journey that I can't judge, and I barely know anything about it, right? But there's a big thing happening here. There's a big transformation happening here for her. And so ultimately, what is this place about for her? Well, it's ultimately this massive humility lesson. It's a big lesson in figuring out what works for her in her relationships, probably. There's real significant women that she's to have experiences with here. Obviously, we see that's a mixed bag for her. Jupiter is giving her a job, clearly. And it may eventually change because of some of the other stuff that's happening here in this chart. But the energy is so powerful, so intense. And so when we start to look at locational astrology, we start to be able to realize things like this. Maybe I don't need to live somewhere that's so intense. Quick story on that one. When I used to just move around, okay, I was born in New Jersey, lived there for 8 years. I lived in Atlanta for 15 years. Well, Atlanta and Athens, Georgia for 15 years. I was in school in Athens, Georgia for 5 years. So 15 years altogether. Boulder for about a year, Durango for about a year, Maui for 2.5 years, and I've been in Arizona now 2002. So it's been a while, 16 and a half years now. Here's what happened to me. And when I just moved places instinctually, I would move to the really strong lines. I'd move like Sarah just did. I'd be like, yeah, let's go to where everything is really crazy. Or at least just really strong, really intense, like major lessons, major everything, major, major, major. And so that's what I would do. I would go to somewhere like that and have really powerful experiences and learn a lot. And then I'd leave because it didn't work. The only time in my life to this day I've ever picked a place just with the astrology, I did move to Maui very deliberately. I moved there on a certain day, literally to start my life over and perhaps meet my life partner. And I did. I met her anyway, 19 years anyway, that day. The dogs are barking again. Anyway, I moved there, but that was a choice under certain circumstances where I had a particular time, I wanted to go, my friend had moved there, blah, 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 blah. But when I moved to Arizona, I did something very different. I chose a place where my chart was not that intense, where there were some good things, there were some challenging things. All in all, it seemed to be pretty good. And the thing is, at that point, I was looking at my wife at the time. We're not technically divorced yet. We're doing that. But my wife at the time and I had to look at both of our charts. And so I thought that was a good all-around place for the two of us. Now, there was something I didn't know at that point. And remember the technique I was showing you earlier with the relocated house cusps? Well, it turns out she actually has her moon on the 12th house cusp here. And I didn't know that in 2002. I didn't know that in 2000. And I didn't know that when we moved here in 2002. I learned it very soon after that. I learned it like I was teaching a class a year or two after that. I learned how that was a big deal. So it turned out there was a problem in her chart here that I didn't know about when we first moved here. And what happened was, we've had 3 kids. Every time we've had a kid, their chart comes in the picture. And every time we have a kid, as you can imagine, things get more interesting and sometimes more challenging, and generally more challenging. And so I literally had told her about a year and a half or 2 years ago, because things were not working there for us anymore, her mom had died. And because of her moon with the 12th house, her mom was always the source of her moon 12th house issues. So it was always her mom. As soon as her mom died, I realized we have to get out of here because your mom's not here anymore. And so now the drama is going to come to us. And it did. So anyway, I tried to move us somewhere else. She wouldn't go. And so here I am. But the first time I actually chose a place where I didn't have really intense astrology was Arizona. And I've been here longer than anywhere, and it's still been really good. Even though we're getting a divorce, I mean, life's been great here. I can't complain about a thing, really. So Sarah goes to Vermont, and it's exactly where her lines are, the Venus line in particular. And even that is arguably just too much, just that. And that doesn't even include this Sun-Moon conjunction on the 6th house cusp opposite a Uranus-Pluto conjunction on the 12th house cusp. That's bonkers. That's really, really intense. And so for Sarah, if I'm working with Sarah, one of the things I'm going to try to do is find places where that Sun-Moon-Pluto-Uranus is not emphasized. And it is heavily emphasized in Vermont. And that's the thing that nobody really knows. And it's sad, but that's why I'm finally getting off my butt and getting up myself on YouTube and doing a free webinar and teaching a class, because I have learned this stuff. Because I sit here and do it every day and it works. It's really pretty simple. I'm not special. I just try and I'm serious. I try to learn this stuff. I'm thorough about it as much as I can be, and I'm always trying to do better. So anyway, Sarah's chart turned out to be, I'm so glad I opened this up to the universe, because this example shows us one of the absolute most important principles that we can look at. It doesn't matter that you have a Venus line there. Okay, because Venus itself is dramatic and intense. Doesn't matter that there's a Jupiter line there, although that is helping. That seems to be helping. And that's not helping with everything, but it is helping with some of the job thing, I think, right? Anyway, the really important point here is in this relocated chart, not just that we have to look at the relocated chart, because there are a lot of people who tell you that. We've got to look at the relocated chart. That is true. What we have to do is look at it in a very particular way. And I can make that case because it works every day. And here it is right there, right? So that's what we got to do. For Sarah, if I'm Sarah, I don't want to live where this is happening and this is happening on this line and this line. Because again, remember, the 6th and 12th houses are challenging. They are traditionally 2 of the 3 most challenging houses in astrology. So do we want to put like her heart and soul in that place where things are stressful and she has great opposition and betrayal and nothing is stable and work is tricky and hard and yet there's a good job? See what I mean? It doesn't work, right? So let me see what else Sarah is saying here. So Sarah saying, he also plows my driveway. Her husband, apparently. Okay. I live next door to his new family. Okay. Like being the dark moon satellite to the Brady Bunch solar system. Except the Brady Bunch parents are secretly, okay, issues there. So that's worth a memoir. Okay. I'm not going to mention one of the things that you said there because I don't want to get you in trouble. But you said, definitely I work constantly and then I get sick from too much of it. Yeah. There you go. I mean, is this a good chart for health? No. The sun and moon are on the 6th house cusp. Saturn is, by the way, also in the 6th house. It's not on a cusp, so I'm not emphasizing it. But it's there. It's definitely adding to this picture. They are opposing 2 outer planets in the sign that represents health, Virgo, in the position that is highly, highly active for the 12th house. So getting sick because you're working too much, boy, does that make a lot of sense too, you know? Now, there's even a problem with Jupiter. Because basically in a Libra rising chart, Jupiter rules the 6th house. And if it is exalted, which it is here, and if it is on an angle, which it is here, it's really emphasized. That really emphasizes the 6th house. So that's why you're working so hard there, and that's why relationships are tough there, and that's why you get along with the guy next door, but obviously you got a divorce. It's not perfect, you know. So, and yet there's a big family next door. The Brady Bunch is next door. There's Jupiter in Cancer, right? Big family. Is that all good? Well, it's a square to your Venus in the 7th, right? So relationship again. Oh, there's the partner having that big family. Anyway, but we can see this chart's just way too much. So let me just check in with my timing here. We have talked for 1 hour and 17 minutes so far. I typically like to talk for about 2 hours, maybe a little longer. 2 to 3 hours is kind of my typical thing. But today is literally just me hanging out with you guys and introducing you to stuff. It's supposed to be astrocartography, obviously locational astrology, so we're focusing on that. But, here's my thing. Here's what I call myself now as far as my work. It's holistic astrology. So I have a big capital letter thing now. It's holistic astrology. Look at me go. So that's my thing. And holistic astrology means a lot of things. And I just taught a class to figure out what it means. Let me explain that. I just taught an intermediate online class. While I was in the process of learning, I was getting a divorce and getting divorced and getting on the other side of the fact that I'm accepting them getting a divorce. So that was interesting. Time to teach a class. Now, I did see that, obviously, like significant stuff in my chart at that time. Saturn was opposing my moon within a 2-degree orb for 5 consecutive months. I got divorced. But I taught my class during that time, too. Now, the class was actually, I think it was a good class. But I had to reschedule and all this drama was going on in my life. So I had to reschedule a bunch of classes, basically. We did get it done. I got the 12 classes done. We recorded all of them. They were about 2-hour classes. I think it was a good class. And anyway, part of that class for me was to explore what is holistic astrology. And I actually own the website for that, holisticastrology.com, which one of these days I have to put up a website. But I still have my main website, astrologyforthiswhole.com. Basically, holistic astrology means a lot of things. I can't even define it, right? I can't be like, I can't number the principles. Maybe I should. I don't know. Maybe I should. But here's what it means. It means that we got to look at everything. And we got to keep our mind open to what is really there. Keep our heart open. Approach things from all these different angles, right? Be holistic in your own life. In other words, take care of yourself. Maybe you need a meditation practice or yoga practice, or it's a whole practice. It's a whole journey. And the astrology, this is what's so cool about the astrology. It's always just this mirror that we're dancing with, right? We're just boogieing out in our own little mirror and just kind of, checking ourselves out all the time. That's what we're doing. Let's face it. We're all Leos in the end. So, we're enamored with this because it's a reflection of us, and it's a reflection of that person over there, and your kids, and your mom, and the girl you think is really cute, and the guy that you're into, and it tells us what happens next year and what happens 20 years from now. So one of the reasons I do Vedic astrology, I'll go ahead and toss this out there. And Sarah, since we've got your chart up here, we'll go ahead and look at this. So these are going to be the dashas, the time lords, the periods of Vedic astrology. Okay, so we have Sarah here. I'm just going to put the camera in the middle there. All right, so what do we see for Sarah? Oh, we see something for Sarah. Okay, boy, we see something for Sarah. This is fun. Okay, so she's on the cusp of a huge change. In fact, she's probably getting there already. Okay, someone had to go. No problem. Anyway, she's been in her K2 cycle for the last 7 years or so. So here's Vedic astrology. Here's why you have to look at Vedic astrology. You have to. If you don't, you're nuts. You're completely crazy. Why would you not do that? Why would you have all this information right in front of you, laying out literally the entire course of your entire life, and you're not even going to look at it? I'm going to look at it. And so... and my clients like it when I look at it because I help them figure out these big cycles. They're amazing. So anyway, she's in the transition between K2 and Venus. Okay, K2 is a 7-year cycle. If you run K2 in your life, it's a 7-year cycle. Venus is a 20-year cycle. If you run Venus in your life, you run a 20-year Venus cycle. So Sarah is about to go into the cycle for her Venus. Oh, I am so glad that we are talking about you today, Sarah, because you just made my job so much easier. Because you're leaving a K2 cycle. Now, she has a K2 Mars conjunction in the second house. The second house is family. It's also benefiting from real estate. Interesting, because you did get the house, you said. Now, K2, though, is tricky. And Mars is tricky. And so K2 is a 7-year twilight zone that people go through. And they go through a huge transition, huge letting go, huge change. They have to let go of a huge chapter of their soul. We're gonna get real dramatic with you guys right now. You're closing a chapter of your soul. Okay, let's work with that. So it's usually weird. It's usually intense. And sometimes in a K2 cycle, you'll get into something in the beginning and you'll think it's going to be awesome. And it might even be awesome for half the time. And by the end of it, it's not awesome anymore. And the universe is saying, yep, you're done. That's over. Move on. That's K2. Move on. And it's funny because we just had that. The sun was conjunct K2 yesterday. It's conjunct K2 right now, of course. It was just applying to it yesterday. So anyway, we're talking about K2 again a little bit here. And so this is about endings. It's about letting go. It's also about a great, profound spiritual transformation if you do it right. Now, for Sarah, this is in the second house. So it's affecting her family. It's affecting her home, her real estate. That's what it did. I mean, when was the divorce, by the way, Sarah? When did that begin? I don't know if you mentioned that. But anyway, I'm curious. Because that would be very interesting. Like, when did that happen? And it would be neat, too, to look at the timing with the start of this cycle. Because right here we see that it starts April 2013. You can definitely go back a year or two on that, maybe even 3. The cycles, in some respects, they're precise. This is precise. You can definitely count on these dates. Mark your calendars. These are definitely going to work. However, because of the issue with the Ayanamsha in Vedic astrology, because other people do things different. Okay, so the divorce began when Uranus conjuncted conjuncted something, and Saturn opposed your sun, moon. All right, so we can go back to when that was and look at that. That's when the divorce began. And you can tell me, too, when, key dates, right? So around 2007. Okay. So that is not going to line up with the Vedic cycles as far as the divorce in 2007. So I would be curious. So the divorce began in 2007. Okay. That's quite a while ago. Okay. So At the same time, there's going to be a change for you April 29th, 2013. And that you may have felt in 2012. You may have felt that in 2011. You said the divorce really happened in 2010. Okay. So remember I was saying you can go back 1 or 2, even 3 years before these cycles start, and you will see them starting. So here it is. Divorce really happened in 2010, 3 years before this cycle. This is not unusual. This is real typical. They often start actually like 1 or 2 or 3 years ahead of time. Literally, it's 1 or 2 or 3 years. You'll see it all the time. Because you hung on before you really let go. Right. Okay. When did you actually split? And kind of, I guess home-wise? Or maybe you're saying that is when it happened in 2010. 2010. Okay. So if we look at, and again, I put this out there, and if it's not true, I'll be super curious, because again, that would be quite unusual, right? But maybe it's just the divorce. I mean, that was 2010. It was 3 years before the K2 cycle. The thing is, with the K2 cycle coming in, it's going to kind of come in a few waves. Like, you'll get 2010 divorce, and you may have had 2011, 2012, 2013. Each of those years may have had their own little gift for you, right? Now, the thing is, the K2 is a 7-year cycle. So if it started in 2010, that means it's over in 2017. On the other hand, we see here the Venus cycle is said to start April 28th of 2020. And I am telling you that is an actual date you can count on. But as you're saying, there's a transitionary, fuzzy sort of window here too. That's my opinion. Really does work this way, I think. So you're now in that transition. You might already be in Venus in one respect. You might be going into Venus in another respect. You are going into Venus in another respect. So what is Venus for Sarah? It is exalted. Why is it exalted? Because it's in Pisces. That is the exaltation sign of Venus. Venus's maximum degree of exaltation is 27 Pisces. You have it 2 degrees from that. So whatever Venus does for you, for one thing, it does it real powerfully. Real powerfully. And as a Virgo rising in Vedic astrology, you're Libra rising in Western, but Virgo in Vedic, Venus rules your 9th house and your 2nd house. So she rules a really auspicious house for you. And she's super exalted. And she rules the 2nd house of making money. So this Venus cycle could be very powerful for making money. It could be very powerful for the 9th house. It will be very powerful for the 9th house. That represents things like travel, higher education, expanding your mind, and kind of receiving the grace of the universe, if you want to put it that way, the grace of God, if you want to put it that way. Anyway, some comments here. 2011, 2012, my program at my college was restructured, which was also hard. Okay, that makes sense. What are you studying in college? A bunch of women healers in an ideal constellation, and we were dissolved. Wow. Okay. See, Mars and South Node, obviously, here's the funny thing about Mars and South Node. They both separate. They both cause people to be separated. So you were separated from these wonderful women healers, also living on this. Were you in Vermont at the time? I'm curious. Anyway, you were in Vermont. Okay. So, so you're on the Venus line in this ideal constellation with these wonderful women healers. That's that exalted Venus, by the way. You teach at a college in Vermont. Okay, cool. So it dissolved during this K2 cycle. So endings happen with Mars and K2. Now, Mars and K2 together, I actually have these two together too, so I think about them a lot. And one of the things that happens with them is they kind of cancel each other out to some extent. Because K2 will reduce something, diminish something. So Mars causes friction, causes separation, causes pain, causes all these things. K2 will sometimes give it to you real good. But most of the time, it's actually trying to pull back on the reins on that one. And so you have this separation, but you live next to the X, and you got the house out of it, and there's a family, and it's kind of weird, but maybe not totally. I'm just guessing at stuff here, right? So here's that K2 cycle for you. And so yes, family. You were in a healing environment. 2nd house is family. So that triggers pain from your family, probably, right? Pain from whatever that trauma, that thing is with your Pluto and moon and sun. So that was coming in with the K2 cycle, right? Now you're going into Venus. So I'm smiling because Venus rules your 9th house. She's a friendly planet for your chart. She's in Pisces. Now, I'm not saying that Venus has no issues. We saw that in Vermont. There's good Venus things happening for you in Vermont and challenging Venus things happening for you in Vermont. Yes, the Venus cycle will therefore have good and bad about it. But the traditional Vedic consideration here, pretty neat, right? Because Venus is super exalted, near her exaltation degree, ruling the ninth house, friendly to the ascendant, with the Lord of the fifth, who is also the Lord of the sixth, Saturn is, and yes, that means there's work to be done in your relationships too. But it's also aspected by Jupiter, who is exalted, who is in the 11th house. So your Venus cycle, boy, is it different than your K2 cycle. And I don't know if you feel that transition yet, because you probably are starting it, and you're probably sensing it, you're probably feeling it. The big things may or may not have already changed, but if they haven't happened yet, they're happening pretty soon. I mean, the latest day they're going to happen is April 28th of 2020, and things will happen on that date, actually. Your life will turn on that day, and you'll see it. It's going to be, I think, cool to see that. But I'm curious with that too. You know, what do you sense anything coming in now, changing? What do you sense is going on in your life? And I could be wrong. You know, tell me if I'm wrong about anything. That's fine. You're saying yes. ... So you're sensing things changing, I think, is what you're saying yes to. Now, what does it look like? What does this Venus look like? Okay, the college may close. Now, Venus rules her ninth house of colleges. The college may close, which you hope it does not. Okay. Well, I'd like to look at more things now before I say a whole lot more about that, because there are other things I should see before I open my mouth a whole lot more. But I will say this. She rules your ninth house. She is super exalted. Maybe this is an ending and it leads to something better, or maybe it's not an ending. Typically, when these new cycles start, you do see big endings. So K2 starts, you get divorced, right? Big changes happen. That's one of the things that just happened in my marriage, by the way. My wife and I are going into new cycles at the same time. And I knew we were either going to change completely together or not be together, you know. So when you see that in relationships, it's interesting. You or your partner going into a new cycle, it's like, okay, what is that going to be? You know, how are you going to work together? You know, so you know, you are preparing by engaging your creativity, is what you're saying. Well, that sounds really good. That sounds really good. And I think you're going to figure some stuff out. Now, we could look at your transits, your progressions, and we could time this stuff a little better probably. Figure out, okay, when are these things possibly changing, if they're going to be changing? Is there some big crazy thing? You know, for example, here's your progressed chart, secondary progressions. I may or may not comment on this right now. Of course, I have to comment on it. Okay, in your two things real quick. You just had a Neptune conjunction to your ascendant in your progressions. So that would show you going into a new phase of life that's very weird, strange, spiritual. Maybe this is the creativity that you're engaging right now. You said you're preparing by engaging your creativity. This is some kind of spiritual, it's meant to be a spiritual awakening of some type, but Neptune overwhelms us too. So careful with that. The thing that is interesting is your Mercury is about to go into Taurus. So it's going to make an ingress. It's going to go into a new sign. Just like for me, I said today. Today, by the way, guys, today is the first day my Saturn is in Leo. Thanks for celebrating with me. But for you, Mercury's going to go into Taurus in a minute here. So let's just animate this and show her when this happens. Let's go forward 1 week at a time. It's coming right up. Real soon, Sarah. Real soon. Your Mercury progresses into Taurus approximately February 11th. It's got to be the 10th or the 11th. This is fun stuff to look at too. You know, we get into this because we get through a big change in ourselves, a big change in our psychology. Now we look at this for Sarah. What is Taurus for her? And I would look at it two ways. Taurus is the 8th house to a Libra rising. So her Mercury is going into Taurus, her 8th whole sign house, in her progressions in a few weeks or something like that, right? It's February 11th. Taurus is also the 3rd house to a Pisces, and she's a double Pisces with a little extra Pisces to boot. So Taurus is definitely 3rd house. So when that happens, Mercury, there's a new Mercury, Taurus, 3rd house energy for her. Does that sound like creativity? Big time, right? Taurus is ruled by Venus, all the arts. 3rd house, creativity, using your hands. It is 8th house, though, to her Libra ascendant, her tropical Libra ascendant. So this is going deep. This is going deep into something. So now when that comes in, how are you going to go deep? Are you going to study astrology, right? Are you going to, do some kind of deep, intense spiritual work, therapeutic type work, psychotherapeutic type of work? what is Mercury doing in the deep, deep, deep realms of the 8th house? How is it getting into the esoteric? How is it getting into the mind, right? How are we attuning ourselves to moksha, to liberation, to spiritual thoughts? So interesting stuff. That's a big change for you. Just like you're going into this Venus cycle, and this is why I love the astrology, and I think you're seeing the holistic astrology right here. You're seeing the Vedic cycle. She's leaving 7 years of the twilight zone, and ending a phase of her soul that is in her 2nd house about family and separation and pain and whatever that's about, and going into this super, super, super exalted spiritual Venus placement, while seeing this progression happen in Taurus too. Mercury going into Taurus. So that's really cool. And we can talk about that. Obviously, we can talk about so many things, right? And we can look at transits. We always have to look at transits when we really get into the timing of things. Now, we'll see how much I want to talk about right now, such as the fact that Neptune is coming up to her moon and her sun. So Sarah, okay, check out the video I just made with Gary Caton, where the thing is he had the moon at 11 Virgo in Asheville, North Carolina, where he is currently living as well. He's gone back or come back. I happen to have my Venus at that degree, 11 Virgo. So he was talking about how he got 5 hits of Neptune. Sorry, the dogs. Neptune opposite the moon. And I got that to my Venus. And so my wife also has Venus at the same degree as me, 11 plus Virgo. So we're getting divorced. He, meanwhile, fell off a roof, which he said he's never done anything careless like that, and really hurt himself. He ended up moving to a different place for a little while because, he ended up moving to another place for a little while. And what I said was, you know what, you probably had to move to another place for a little while because that first pass of that transit apparently took you off the roof and could have taken you out. This is an 8th house moon he has there. It's a very intense but deep, and that's why he does all this deep, great work with astrology and counseling and all kinds of cool stuff. But it's intense. So, Sarah, Neptune's coming to your moon and your sun. And this year, in fact, it makes it to 18 degrees. It's about to transit into the 6th house of your Rochester, New York natal chart. When it gets to 18, it'll get to the 6th house cusp of your chart in Vermont. Obviously, you're doing a lot of stuff in Vermont, and you're talking about, hey, the college could be ending, or this and that could be ending. I have to tell you, if you're in Vermont during this Neptune transit, Neptune to your moon, Neptune to your sun, Neptune opposite your Pluto, Neptune opposite Uranus, on the cusp of the 6th house, opposite those planets, on the cusp of the 12th house. It's not going to be the easiest time. Neptune is tough. Neptune is the art of getting hit by a 50-foot wave. So that's Neptune. Gary left Asheville, North Carolina, because he needed to get off that line. You may need to get off this line. I'm just throwing that out to you. It's a thought. It's an idea. I'm being honest with you. What would I think if this were me? And I would say, this may not be the easiest time for me to be in Vermont, because and Neptune is health issues too. It can be health issues. When health issues come in, you're going to see Saturn or Neptune. And here it's getting involved with that whole configuration for you that's involved with health and work and relationships and home and all that business, right? So how do we work with this, right? So Sarah says, I'm hearing you. She says, previously she said, I am writing a book on the poetics of healing. That's cool. Poetics of healing. That's very Venus and Pisces. That's stay with Venus and Pisces. You've got Venus and Pisces in your Vedic chart. You've got mojo there. That's awesome. So you're engaging your creativity. Awesome. Okay. So what do you do with this? I think in an ideal world, you would somehow live somewhere else for a while. That may not be practical. In that case, we talk about what do you do to live there? What are some of the remedial measures you can take? What are the things you can do to try to make this better? How far away from Vermont and for how long? Neptune takes a while. It's a slow outer planet. It's going to make 18 Pisces this year. Next year, it'll be going back and forth over 18, 19 Pisces. The year after that, it's probably going to retrograde back around that same point too. So you are so just into this. In fact, look at this. This is crazy. Look at the rising degree in Rochester for her, 1426 Libra. Where's Neptune today? 1429 Pisces. In other words, it is just past the degree and minutes of the ascendant into her 6th house, if we use an equal house chart, which is one of the house systems that I use. So Neptune has gone basically today into her 6th house. And here we are. So Sarah, I think the universe is watching out for you on some level here. You know, your mom just went into the hospital last night. There you go. Hospital is 12th house, not 6th. But obviously we've got the 6-12 going on. The moon is the mother. The 6th house, stressful stuff. Because it's opposing Pluto and Uranus at the 12th house, that's your mom going into the hospital. And so I'm going to go ahead and just show this chat, because I know some people are going to see this on YouTube and think I'm making this stuff up. But anyway, here's Sarah. My mom just went in the hospital, blah, blah, blah. I'm hearing you. I'm writing a book on the poetics of healing. Right, so anyway, I'm just telling you exactly what's in the chat. And that was, like, that could have been last night. I mean, like, let's animate that. Like, when did Neptune reach the very degree, right? The very degree of your ascendant in Rochester, New York. Okay. So if I were trying to get that as perfect as I can, right, to the hour as much as I can, I would have said that comes to the same exact point. Neptune getting to 1426. When does it happen? The 15th of January in the afternoon, Tuesday. You're saying yesterday your mom went to the hospital. Pretty close. We're off by maybe a day here, right? I mean, this is why I love astrology. This is why I love astrology. This stuff always works, and it's crazy. And it's, you're saying we can't predict everything. What if she said, oh, what's going to happen tomorrow when Neptune goes to my 6th house, you know, the degree of the ascendant in my progress chart nearing my moon? I mean, I could have had a bunch of ideas, right? But I would have thought, well, probably something a little stressful, health-related maybe, or work-related, or relationship, you know, like I would have expected some weird, overwhelming thing that's Neptune. It's the art of getting hit by a 50-foot wave. Your mom's in the hospital. She just got hit by a 50-foot wave of some type, right? Tuesday she got sick. Okay, I'm going to show you guys the chat. Tuesday she got sick, and it took her that long to get to the hospital. Okay, I'm not making this up. Sarah, you're not fake, right? No, she's not. Anyway, astrology's fun. How are we doing on time? We're at 1 hour and 42. I can talk I can blather on for at least 18 more minutes. Sarah, we're obviously having fun with this stuff. Do you have any questions for me? We have a little time. Obviously, I haven't given you a whole lot going forward yet, other than, like, you may not want to be in Vermont over the next few years so much. And maybe you have to be there, and maybe you just travel more than you usually do or something. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. But am I concerned about this as an astrologer? Totally. I would totally be concerned about that if it were me and I were in Vermont at that time. Can we find ways to work with this? Sure. But are there going to be some challenges? Yeah. You know. So here's where it's coming together. Because the location is making the transit harder. Because, one, it's emphasizing her sun, moon, Pluto, and Uranus. And two, it's emphasizing them in difficult places. Okay, Tracy has to leave now. No problem. Thank you, Tracy. I am going to do another one of these tonight, by the way. You're welcome to show up. I will probably repeat myself on some points, but I try not to do that. So, obviously tonight, when we do the thing tonight, it's going to be 9:30 Eastern. Yeah, 6:30 Pacific. That's 7:30 for me in Arizona here. As we are on Mountain Standard Time all the time, we do not do daylight savings. We have to adjust to your times. We got to be like, oh, wait a minute, now the East Coast is 3 hours away. Oh, wait a minute, now the East Coast is 2 hours away. So anyway, last two places I lived were Arizona and Hawaii, and you don't have to change your clock. So maybe eventually the whole country will get with that. But it's weird because then, you know, I have to adjust myself to everybody else, and everybody else has to remember how many hours apart I am from them. So that's inconvenient, but anyway. Thank you. So yeah, we'll do this tonight, 6:30 Pacific, 9:30 Eastern. We'll have another. We'll pull up another chart. We'll talk. I'll talk about some of the same stuff, and I'll try to do new stuff too. Because if you want to go to both of them, I want to try to give you some new stuff too. Obviously, we're not necessarily done here. Obviously, so Sarah. Okay, if you have any other sort of questions, you know, things we can talk about, we can do that. We could look at other places, obviously. We could look at other things. We could look at this timing piece, right? Now, let's go back to the fact that you're going into the Venus cycle, which looks like you've got something really nice coming in with that. Now, it's still strong medicine in the sense, but I think it's really quite positive. I think that 20-year cycle is going to have a lot of good things for you, certainly, which is great. It's a 20-year cycle, and it looks pretty cool. This Neptune transit is coming in here, too. And it's particularly if you're in Vermont, even more so, I should say, if you're in Vermont. This is going to be a big deal, by the way, Sarah, no matter where you go. you can stay in Vermont, you can go somewhere else, but you're still going to have this Neptune transit. Yeah, you just are. Now, when is that really going to start coming in? I think it might be February when you start really noticing this. Because Neptune it's in June when it gets up to 18 and it makes a station. And about 4 months before that is when you can really start to see the drama. Whatever the drama is, whatever the story is, whatever's happening, it starts happening. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Neptune goes in your 6th house, and even though your mom just went in the hospital, which is indication that, yes, there's something challenging here. Maybe you ride a good wave. Maybe you get on that Venus energy coming in, and your progressed Mercury going into Taurus, and you find that creativity and that depth, and you go deep. Because what could the 6th house be about if you go deep? Your own. It's really taking care of yourself, your own education. You can be going back to school, maybe for a Neptune thing. Could be good for that. It could be, Neptune really. Again, how do you master the art of getting hit by a 50-foot wave? Well, you got to surrender, right? I mean, I think if you try to, I'm going to get into some swimming metaphors here. Watch out, but if you're swimming too hard in the ocean, eventually you're going to get tired and drown, right? So you can't fight it. You got to go with it somehow. You got to surrender. I don't know. For me, surrender is always such a powerful place spiritually. I have the Sun trine Neptune. I have a lot of cool Neptune stuff in my chart. It's probably the thing I like the most about my chart. And, and so maybe that gives me a little qualifications to talk about it, just in the sense that, when Neptune is really active in your life, you put you go into a salutation pose, you kneel, you put your head on the ground, right? You got to humble yourself. This life is, we think it's all so important and so serious, and everything is all about me and all about all my needs and all my stuff. We're also such egotistical maniacs, right? And Neptune comes along and just reminds you who you really are. And and that's the essence of entire religious traditions like Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta Hinduism. Who am I? Who am I? Watch your thoughts. You see where that goes. You find out who you are when you watch your cognitive process. So Neptune is about that cognitive process of, it's about that cognitive process of seeing the operation of your mind if you choose to apply it through meditation. And meditation is a very key component to what Neptune represents. Now, we all like to say that we all like to do our meditation, and then we're all slackers and we don't do it, right? Sometimes I'm really good about meditating in my life, and sometimes I'm not. But it's probably consistently the most helpful thing that I do for myself. So if I were a smarter mammal, I would do it every day. I'm working on being a smarter mammal. But anyway, surrender is a big piece of this. And spiritual practices are a big piece of this. Now, the 6th house can be about service, right? So maybe you find some incredible selfless service to do with this. And, we're just kind of riffing a little bit. We're just kind of looking at this transit because it is a big deal. And I would say for you too, Sarah, that because this connects to your Pluto, that connects to the traumas, that connects to all the old stuff, really powerful spiritual lessons for you, massively powerful spiritual lessons, right? The ultimate lessons. So Neptune opposing your Pluto means that there is, something's getting in there and kind of grinding in there a little bit, making it a little harder, but it's also going to bring out something maybe that needs healing. And so maybe you have to find a way to give space for that. If you're in Vermont, do you pursue some kind of therapy? Do you take that time to explore what's going on with you emotionally? You said, yes, it feels like an ancestral healing theme these days. You said, I have Sun trine Neptune too, and I always felt it was friendly. Awesome. I will say, even though I have the Sun trine Neptune, when Neptune opposed my Sun, or squared my Neptune, that was not easy. So you can be in tune with Neptune And it might even make it harder because I'm used to being in tune with Neptune. I'm used to the magic kind of flowing in my life and just kind of going with the flow. And so sometimes when it doesn't, it's like, what's that, you know? You said since Neptune is a higher octave of Venus, could it work to transmute the effects of the wave to something more positive in a transformational sense? I want to go ahead and say, yeah. I mean, I love optimism, and I believe that it is a higher octave of Venus, and you are going into a Venus cycle in your Vedic chart with an incredibly exalted Venus who rules your ninth house. So ultimately, I'm not that concerned with this, but I am certainly concerned with this too. Like it's really kind of a contradiction. It's something that looks like one thing and then another thing looks like another thing. But yes, can this be elevated to a higher plane, like you're saying, right, and become a higher function of Venus? And you have a higher functioning Venus. Let's face it. You have a massively, your Venus, I'm sure, is quite beautiful when she's, you know, in love or doing her art or, you know, creating beauty or whatever. I mean, you have a massively beautiful Venus. And it's not, that's the thing. Like, this is just your astrology. This is your cosmic mirror. You have access to an amazing Venus. And so you get to play with that, and you're about to get to play with it for 20 years if you're not already. You know, maybe this new focus on the creativity is coming in. But you know, but who knows? Because the beginning of this cycle is going to have its Neptunian component to it, right? And you see what I'm doing today? I'm literally just pulling up things in the moment and talking about them. Like, you know, I mean, if we really are thorough about this, like I could be in a session, I can look at all the transits and make sure to just pull it together and get the timing more precise, right? But you know, we're doing an introduction today, and I think it's good to talk about these things and look at how all these things interact. Because again, I'm trying to show you guys what holistic astrology is. And the thing is, holistic astrology isn't necessarily the way I do astrology. You know, I'm not trying to teach people to do it just the way I do it. I'll teach you everything I know, essentially. That's great. And I want you to take that baton and carry it much further. Right? But holistic astrology is showing up and doing your best to be open to what is needed in the moment. And being open to different kinds of astrology and putting these pieces together and letting it be kind of a sacred process. You know, these things take time to explore with someone. And that's why I don't, you know, just finish a reading and say, oh, you know, your 90 minutes are up and just kick your butt out the door. Because I'm talking about your life. I'm talking about some of the most important things in your entire life. And my job as an astrologer is to say, here's that mirror that the universe is holding up for you to look at. Let's just take a look at it. And let's see when things are going to happen. And let's see what's going to happen with you and that guy. No, I'm not saying I know the whole thing. I'm not saying I know the ultimate everything. No, I don't. But I can tell you a lot of cool stuff. And you can meditate on it and think about it and go, okay, here's the issue in this relationship. Maybe we have this particular kind of connection between our charts, right? Let's do something really goofy, right? Let's say me and Sarah were in a relationship. And this is the goofiest thing I've ever done in my life, by the way. But I want to show you just synastry real quick, right? Leo, Pisces, right off the bat, our sun signs are not really the same. I like Pisces, but I don't really have great Pisces, you know, great friends, great intimate lovers. I don't have Pisces in my life like that. It's just not there. Even with Venus and Virgo, opposite Pisces. I like Pisces, right? But let's say she met this guy and his name was Moses, and she said, well, you know, should I be with him? And it'd be like this. Right? And right off the bat, we'd be like, well, okay, we got some work to do because we're starting off with a disconnect. The suns are not connecting. Doesn't mean I can't be her astrologer today, right? But we look at things like this to see how people line up. And you focus on the things that are most significant. And those are the things that allow you to kind of have your meditative mindset for your relationship. Now, some relationships are crazy complex. My wife and I that I'm splitting with, we were born 4 days apart. So everything practically is conjunct, but not everything, right? So in a situation like that, it's intense. I also dated someone once who was born the exact same day as me. We dated for a year. Before I met my wife, I dated her for a year. She was born a year and a half. I'm sorry. Usually around the 2 hour mark, I start missing my words a little more. She was born an hour and a half before me on the other coast. We have the same rising sign in Vedic astrology, different in Western. So, what do you do with that? We were like pretty much almost identical, except she was a Libra rising and I was a Scorpio rising. So that's one of the reasons why it didn't work that well. But, you know, I mean, she's still a good friend of mine. We talk and stuff. And because we're freaking the same, you know? So we look at this too. And so sometimes in synastry, there's too much like that. And it's like, well, this is a different kind of thing. But typically that's not the way it is, right? Typically, you're not born the same day as somebody, right? Or you're not even born 4 days apart from somebody, and then you can see things, and it's useful. So do we know where your relationship's going to go? Depends. Sometimes it's pretty clear it's not going to go very far. And sometimes it's not, right? And sometimes there are connections there and there are complications there. And then we look at what those are and we try to understand them. So here's holistic astrology, right? Here I am. I'm just exposing you to a lot of things. And I think you can see too that, I really like the nitty gritty. Like I have Venus in Virgo and I like figuring out all this stuff. So when we get into the class, which I'm starting January 31st, that's my holistic astrology, locational astrology class. And I haven't taught that. I think it's been a decade or so. It's been a long time. I do have an old class for sale on my website. You can actually still take that. If you want to hear the version of it that I taught 10 years ago, I mean, people really liked that class. I've always said that's the best class I've ever taught. But now you're going to get, the most up-to-date one, obviously. There is a sliding scale on that for the class. I'm asking for, you can go to my website and check it out, astrologyforthesoul.com. Happy to answer any questions. You can email me. You can text me. You can call me. I may or may not answer. May or may not answer. Generally, I'm sitting here doing astrology. That's pretty much my gig. So trying to, figure out how to just be my own secretary at this point. I need to hire a digital assistant because it's just the hardest thing for me at this point is just trying to schedule with everybody and communicate with everybody. But anyway, you can reach out to me. Happy to talk to you. I have at times offered a little free 15-minute intro reading with this kind of thing. I'm backed up on those right now, and I've got I've got people waiting basically, so I can't offer that to you right now. But I do those from time to time. So stay up. If you send me an email and say, hey, I want to do one of those 15-minute free things, basically what that means is I just look at where you are now and I tell you what I think about it, like we did in a super extended fashion for Sarah today. So yeah, you can always do that. And love talking about this stuff. I love sitting here and helping people figure it out. If I can help, I feel like I don't know, man. I just every day if I can help someone, if I can help someone figure this stuff out, it really makes me happy, because if I can help someone move from a place where they're totally unhappy, right, to a place where they could be really happy, how am I lucky enough to be sitting here in this chair doing that for a living? I don't know, but here's all the stuff. Now, let me show you this too. One of the teachings I have now is that there's 6 things you got to look at in locational astrology. We're going to go over that in my class, obviously. We did some of them today. We looked at astrocartography lines. We looked at some of the relocated chart positions. That's kind of my technique. I guess that is my technique. At some point, I have to just accept that that's my technique. I'm like, I feel it feels hokey, but it's true, and I want it to be out there because it really works, and I want people to know this because people are moving to. Okay, I was on Chris Brennan's podcast, the astrology podcast, episode 123. It's a really good intro to my work if you want to check it out. Also, I did one with Adam Summer, Holes to Heaven podcast. The one with Chris was a little more kind of straight button up professional maybe, and the one with Adam, we were kind of goofing off, and I was talking about Lord of the Rings and stuff with him, so it was a little different. But those were actually really good podcasts. I think people that have listened to them have really appreciated those. So check those out. Holes to Heaven, the astrology podcast, Moses Siregar, if you want to check out more of my stuff on astrology, locational astrology in particular. But one of the things I've mentioned is that there's 6 things we got to look at. And we've got the big astrocartography lines. We have the relocated lines. Oh, sorry. The thing I was going to say is that on Chris's podcast, he was in Seattle at one point. It's on his podcast. And we were talking about how he was having all these relationship sort of stuff going on there that was challenging. I pull it up, and like Venus is smack dab on his 12th house cusp there. Of course, it works for everybody. So that is something I'm going to go ahead and say. I've discovered that. It's based on things that other people have also discovered. Essentially, like, you can read Rob Hand's book about, whole sign houses, or look at the systems approach, a Neo-Vedic approach. You know what they say? They say that the degree of the ascendant is the most powerful point in any house. The MEP, the most effective point, is systems approach. But Rob Hand says, even though we're doing whole sign houses, we can still use the degree of the ascendant as the most powerful point in the house. Now, I actually I kind of figured out my locational thing before going back and finding that from Rob. But what happened was I would go back and go, oh, wait a minute. I'm not the only person who's been saying this. I'm not saying anything, terribly significant, except that it works really well. We need to use it. We got to start using it. So the degree of the ascendant, and you can check out the one I did with Gary Caton too. we were looking at, for him, his moon. His moon is on the 8th house cusp in Asheville. 9th house cusp. Well, there might be someone here at my house, so I might have to end this in a minute. Anyway, 9th house in Colorado. And we were looking at the difference there and exactly where that position was. And I showed him on the map. I'm so sorry about the dogs. I showed him exactly on the map exactly where that position is. So somebody's here. Somebody's here. I have been talking for almost exactly 2 hours. And I suppose that's a pretty nice round number. So I think what I'm going to do, now that my dogs are telling me it's time to go, is go. And I hope you can come back and do the one tonight. Or do the class, or, you know, a reading, or whatever. I like trying to end this video because my dogs won't stop barking. So anyway, I'm just going to check the chat one more time and say thank you to everybody. Check out my Facebook page. You can find all my links on my website. Yep, there it is. And yeah, someone is definitely here. And it's time for me to go. Thank you all for being here. It's been fun to talk about holistic astrology and locational astrology and astrocartography. I'm going to sign off. Have a good day. Aloha. Adios.